council meeting following the adoption of this council directive. And it listed that it happened January through May of 2013.
And I think that the way that Laura had handled the financial reporting and everything was what was accepted by the city council and comply with that. So if the city council would like changes to anything, that could be something that's discussed and put as an action item to change the reporting. If the city council's okay with the manner it's being done in now, then the way it was previously passed, we did it.
So historically, the agenda has been set that the first meeting of the month, the city manager reports. At the second meeting of the month, the financials have been given. Yeah, to control. So that's been the standard practice when I got here, and we continue that practice.
But as for why the rest of the council directives are included in there, from what I can recall from when this contract was going through, those were more just to be inclusive, so that the incoming city manager would know that she's the TIPIA officer. That was council directive number 1, that the city manager is the TIPIA officer. 2 through 4 on there are really inapplicable. They're the stating of the Pledge of Allegiance comment period during each council meeting. So those were just included as part of the package.
John, what did you have a question?
I think traditionally, the council, at least when I was on it, we have failed to use the form. And since Mrs. Turner is using, she used the form the first time, there's nothing in the file that indicates anyone else used the form or did any other kind of written review. So it would be good if we could establish the practice and go over the form, because I think that form is rather difficult. You know, so if you could start out with that. We know, see, what we don't have are standards to measure anything by. That's the other thing.
Right.
So I'm not sure this is going to be premature to do this at the end of July.
Some of those that require 0, because we're not when she's performing her job, we're not there to see her, so we can't rate her.
Yeah, that's my point. I mean, so I don't know, I mean, if we use the form, then we need to be very careful that we do have factual information that we're using and grading it appropriately based on what we have heard or the reports we have had. I know that Mrs. Turner gave us her report for this particular month that she's going to use in this meeting. But it would be good if we could have other reports to see accomplishments. I don't know if they're available or not, but that would give us an indication of the performance. Again, we don't have standards, so it's just kind of saying, oh yeah, you completed this, you get a check mark for that one. You know, or you didn't complete this, if we think there's something that needs to be done. So basically, it's going to be that kind of performance review. Unless we take the time to do standards, and I'm not sure whether we can get that.
Also, there should be a means to where we can, you know, if somebody's employee stops us on the street and asks us questions, or they're having difficulties, and there needs to be a means that we can see how you're handling that situation. I know we can't get into personnel, but if they feel that they're not getting their answers or results and they come to us, what means do we have to come to you and say, hey, so-and-so came to me, he's still having problems?
I think, in my opinion, I would ask them have they actually been spoken to you rather than to address it, to see if I can have an opportunity to address it. I mean, I think that would be a good question. Have you spoken to them, like, you know,
Yeah, well, I usually do that.
I wish you would come in there and you
That they have, and not necessarily with you, could have been with them also, it's happened in the past, but I'm saying situations like that do arise. You come to them and say, hey, we're not getting it, and we're scared to approach you because we don't know what the results will be.
I think maybe we can't really approach her because she's gonna do her job regardless of, but I think it gives us an opportunity to be able to say, from that employee, then they say, well, we talked to Mrs. Turner, or we talked to whatever, and they didn't give us, she didn't give us the, so then it's our job, I guess we can ask her, well, this happened, but not get so much involved, but to rate her and say, well, this, I wanna put it against whatever, because, or plus, or whatever, if it's good or bad, or whatever.
You have to be careful, because you have to remember, some of the guidelines are really set, like some of the employees have come to me and saying that they didn't really like the 1% raise, but that was a raise that you all approved and left into the budget, and so for us to be amending and changing things, it affects your bargaining agreement, it also affects what you all have put in place and approved in reference to a budget. And so, as we go forward, in reference to that, our evaluations, which were done before I got here, we have to be able to look at that. And so some of that, they inherited with this fiscal budget year, in reference to the disparity, in reference to what people get made and how people are hired, it was what was there.
But I don't know how we go, you know, because there is, before Andy and before Ms. Turner or whatever, there is big complaints about how everything's going on. And how do you do it without,
And that is, you're certainly on point there, and where you get into the issue is the charter and the contract both state that council has hands-off on direct personnel, but the city manager is your employee. And so how the city manager manages her employees is part of the criteria and is part of the performance evaluation that's in here. So that, it's a fine line if a employee approaches you with an issue, or you, Councilman Morones, or any of the council members, and says that they're having a specific issue with the city council, with the city manager, then the city manager is correct. It should be first referred to the city manager to address the issue, and if she's able to resolve the issue, then the city council can take that into account. If there remains an issue and things like that, that also can be taken into account as part of the personnel evaluation.
and that's kind of where I see it at the evaluation, because I mean, there, and I'm not saying because of her, I'm saying it could be any employee. It's just like a supervisor, you know, it comes and says, well, I can, you know, there are certain supervisors that can talk to their, whoever they're in charge of, they can talk the way they want to talk. But then here comes another employee and says, well, I can fire you at this moment or whatever, and either you're gonna put, you wanna send this person to get classes for leadership, but you don't wanna send the other one because she's okay. So, you know, there's a lot that, you know, who do you go, who do you know, you write up certain people, but you don't write up the rest of the people.
Favoritism.
Yeah, there's a lot of favoritism, so how do you, we don't wanna get involved, but at the same time, what we need to do is put it in this evaluation and just, I mean, instead of going in there in the office and saying, well, you do this or do that, I'd rather just do it here, right, on paper.
Chris, and the same token, when somebody complains to any of us, what I do is I'll come and I'll talk to Henrietta. I won't mention employee name or anything. I just say, this problem was brought to my attention. You know, can you give me a heads up of what's happening? That's why I like the communication when she sends the emails and texts us and tells us what's going on, so we don't hear it out in the streets before we're hearing it from our own city manager. You know, and you know how that happens. You know, but I'll ask, what's the other side, because there's always two sides to the story. Anytime anybody new comes in, employees will always, you know, get defensive, they don't want to be told or whatever, because they're so used to everything being the old way. You know, changes are hard for some people to take. I'm not saying that they're wrong, I'm just saying we have to look at the whole picture.
And that's part of where the personnel evaluation comes in, because the city manager is protected from direct council involvement, but she's also responsible for all of her subordinates, and so that's the cost
But we can't
benefit.
talk.
Yeah, but that's the way I kinda look at it, because I'd rather not say, because if Mr. Morones came in here and he wanted to do this, he told me to do, so I'd rather not that, I'd rather do it on the evaluation every 3 months or whatever.
And that's
Whatever.
the,
And I think that's the way it is, because if she comes and says, well, he came in here this day, she'll write it down and say, he told me. And you do wanna talk to her, because the best thing to do is talk it out. But at the same time, she can turn around and say, well, you have no reason to tell me I run this boat until the evaluation. That's what I'm saying.
and that's where when an employee comes to you, Ms. Turner's right, and Andy would have been the same way, Mr. Pellick, and everybody who's come before, is when somebody approaches a city council member directly with an issue, due to the chain of command, they need to go to their supervisor first, and if the supervisor doesn't respond, then to the city manager, and go from there. And if it still comes up, then you're at the performance evaluation is where that comes in on how that's being handled within the chain of command. And if it is, and the issues arise, but they get taken care of, that's the way it's supposed to happen. If they arise and they don't, then you can't take individual action, but that goes into your score on that section of whatever this is.
Doesn't the city have a formal complaint program?
There is a chain of command in the personnel policy.
Because if you're gonna allow the city council the sword of Damocles to hold over the manager's head for the way what if she fires somebody? And she has causes for fire?
Then that's
And
within.
that person is still PO'd about it and goes to one of the city council members, and then they come back and talks to the city manager and hammers her on one of these isochronal performance appraisals. That's not the way to run chain of command.
No.
There's no way, or what it is the city manager is responsible for personnel decisions.
Agreed.
If the city manager decides that somebody needs to be let go because they're not performing their duties or anything else, that's definitely within the scope and purview of her authority. If it's a wrongful termination, or if somebody has a claim like that, then they have remedies through other things. However, if the city manager or any supervisor terminates somebody without proper cause or without justification, then it is the city council's job to take that into account as well when they do personnel, to say, do you have good people that fit the positions? Are they doing the job? Are they doing it well? And are you listening to their concerns when they bring them to you if they're valid? And are you implementing solutions on that? That's what the city council's job is to do for the city manager.
Excuse me, if I can make a suggestion, I know Sherry worked at a bank and I was an officer at a bank for many years. When we had to speak, and this goes on in the corporate world also, when we had to address something with an employee, it was never just myself and that employee. There was another party there. So one can't say, well, she said, I said, she said, I said. There were two of us that spoke to that employee. Just so to keep it on the unbiased, objective way. And there was always a form to be completed, exactly what the issue was, what the recommendations for correcting it were all the time. And also, if you have somebody on the street that comes to you and says, well, so-and-so, my street hasn't been paved, or they haven't come for this, and you tell Henrietta, I would suggest that there should be a form for that on file, so that you have when it was addressed, when they came to you, when it's proposed to be fixed, and when it was fixed, so that there's a documentation. It just seems like there's a lack of documentation.
And this is the two-tiered approach here. For any employees that come to the city manager or things like that, that's totally within the city manager's purview of how those situations are handled, because that involves personnel. That's totally within her discretion. For city council's relations with the city manager, that's why we have these forms, and that's why we'll amend these forms, however that comes out to be, whatever gets decided when we get to that position of city council. And that will be the documentation, that will be everything for the city manager on there. So it's not directly like, well, I guess it would be like a bank. It'd be if a teller had an issue with the supervisor, it went straight to the board.
No.
So that's the situation we're kind of comparative here. So it goes up the chain, and then there's the city council and the city manager interaction.
What we don't have is an actual HR department, because that's what typically employees
It would go through.
And they would develop those forms, actually.
Yeah.
So,
And we do have,
Now we're starting.
Can I speak? What we're trying to do is establish an HR, don't put Margaret on the spot, but that's one of the reasons why we relocated her to the back area, because that's part of her duties that she was doing. We expanded that on the HR part of it. The purpose of the performance appraisal is really to be like a critique, to say, this is what you're doing well, this is what you're not doing well, this is what you can improve. It's kind of like an objective criticism, and that's why it's so important for somebody to do a self-evaluation, because how they see themselves and how other people see themselves could be two separate things. And then is to give feedback to whomever that personnel be it the city manager or be it an employee, to say, you thought you were doing a good thing, but you're cutting corners and that's not how you should be doing. Or you're doing a really good job communicating on this end, but not necessarily keeping up with the paperwork or the filing. So the purpose of the performance evaluation is to say, this is what you're doing good, this is what you need to have improvements on, and this is what you're not doing so well, which is, I believe, the 0 to 10. And if it doesn't apply, then it doesn't apply.
And I think we understand that. I think that the question that came up is what if someone doesn't feel they have a safe haven or someone to go to other than the city manager, you know, who do they go to? And I'm glad to hear that you're establishing a HR department with Margaret. She'll be good at it, and so that way.
Establishing that. We also established the forms, our new code enforcement CJ, she's establishing because these forms don't exist now, a complaint form for something called VIN, and so that as soon as we get it all critiqued and done, you should be getting a copy for yourself so that you can submit them when people come to complain about the street or a backyard. And that would give me a documentation to send it back to you, and then I can actually add that to it and say, at a quarterly time, these are all the complaints that we received, and we've been able to address that. So there are a lot of foundation issues that were not in place. Some of them that are in place, we need to probably look at. The evaluation, Margaret just got through putting everything together for me. We have it in a wonderful black box. But staff themselves did not do a self-evaluation. It was only the supervisors. We are going to implement a self-evaluation as it should be, and then we're going to go forward and communicate with the supervisors to do an evaluation, and then they get to do an evaluation, because I've had some opportunity to interact with some staff on different levels. Rather than when I first came in the first review, I hadn't met them all, and so I've had an opportunity to meet with them and to interact with them and to see some of the performances. So hopefully it'll be a creative, a positive response among the overall.
Madam Chairman, may I make one here too? And this goes more basically to the relationship that the council should have with the city manager. And it's very clearly, and I think very normally, supervisor-employee. And while you may be prohibited by the charter from going directly to the employees, and I see that as being very proper, but I think we're overreacting to that. That doesn't mean that you don't have control over the organization as you should as a supervisor through your employee. And so it's very appropriate, in my opinion, to give her the requirements that you have in specific terms, and maybe work some kind of a work plan or standards for performance. But clearly, when there are problems below her, then your employee is her. You hold her responsible. Now, you're not arbitrary, and you don't listen to employees and run with it and do something without necessarily looking into it and finding that it's appropriate to do whatever you intend to do. But by the same token, Mr. Morones indicates, and maybe I'm mishearing him, afraid to go to her. No, you folks as a group are the supervisor. And you have all the rights a supervisor has to deal with your employee and make requirements that are meaningful and appropriate, reasonable. But nevertheless, don't shy away from that, because you have a very clear responsibility to the constituents that you represent to run an outfit here, and you run it through your professional city manager. But nevertheless, final responsibility is over here as a group. Thank you.
Very well said, President.
And that's where this, like we're trying to have more objective standards and try to get away from the subjectivity of we think you're doing it okay here, we don't really have anything to compare it with. I think that's a good idea to try to build some more into these review forms because it is difficult. There are certain set goals, we want you to develop a road plan, we want you to develop a 5-year capital improvements plan. Those are easy to see if they're done and if they've been presented to the council, you know, and the council and the manager have talked those out. That's easy to grade on. Things that you get into like employee relations, because city council is not present every day of the week, and things like that are a little more difficult. And so I don't have a magic solution. I know people who have worked with HR before.
When was this form prepared? Do we know?
Long before I started working for Lyft.
And
I
that
can
was
tell you
attached
that.
to the contract, correct?
Correct, and this is the same one that was attached to Mr. Jocelyn's contract as well.
It
when he
doesn't mean
was-
that we have to use this if we find something else, right?
In the contract, it has this as Exhibit A, so it is in there. If everybody gets together and develops a new evaluation criteria, if the city manager and city council works together to do so, to develop a criteria, then it would be up to council and the city manager to do an amendment to replace the form.
Because with having the right form would be to do a better evaluation.
I believe that would help quite a bit.
If I may ask, is there a appropriate evaluation form for other employees?
That would be the city manager.
It's,
Is it the same way?
that, no, it's a simpler form, it's not very comprehensive at all.
So that sounds like that needs to, you can't just do for the city manager and not have it appropriate for all the employees. Yeah.
We can look at, looking at a different evaluation tool and see samples they have been putting online, and we can supply you some in reference to that. My only thing is that this was attached to the contract, and so.
It should be saying that if we decide we can make an amendment.
If everybody, both parties to the contract, the city manager and city council agree, then yes.
feel like-
You would find something, you know what we're looking for.
I don't know what you're looking for, but I can give you.
What you would want to be evaluated on.
Well, it's more so like, there's other positions similar to mine, and we can look at an evaluation tool for someone in reference to that.
There are multiple
In
instruments.
general.
I mean, I think that you're going to find that a lot of them are alike. The ones that I have difficulty with are like time management, you know, planning work activities. Well, how do we know that?
I can give you samples. I mean, you can just go online and I can provide you samples and see if this is what, you can make up your own tool or combination of maybe different ones that you can look at, but.
But for now, this one will suffice, because we've got so many other things on our plate that I don't want to be responsible for adding one more thing, not right now anyway. So we'll do the best we can with this one.
Yeah, and this one, if it's not applicable, every council member is welcome to put NA in there or whatever they decide when they're reviewing the form.
Exactly.
If they're not comfortable answering a question because they don't feel that you don't have enough
Because we
information,
don't know.
then mark it not applicable, and that just won't be a consideration.
That's why I think that Mrs. Turner's reports are,
Well, I made a note to myself. I will put together in the package all reports I've submitted since I've been here, city manager, monthly WB income, much quarter. To that there were submitted good reports. So I can supply that to you. And in my former life, I sat on the school board and we did an evaluation for a superintendent. There were things in the contract that we set as a board member. The board set goals and objectives for them. You have those in the contract. So it may be able to tie it in closer. If you had an evaluation tool that corresponded with goal 1 and or directive 1 that we had before, yes, no, those type of correspondence you can do. Because I think the confusion is that this evaluation tool that you attach to the contract is really disjointed from the
it's
contract.
disconnected.
It
That's
doesn't
the
do
problem.
that. But we can look at something in reference to that, similar to a superintendent's evaluation.
So, Chris, for now, I mean, it could be a combination of this plus a summary sheet.
I think that would be, yeah, because there is spaces in there for justification for rating. You can do the summary sheet separately.
I believe the last one had, like, you wanted to make any comments and maybe in particular, evaluation summary. They have a few lines there, of course, you could attach whatever you like to do. And then what you should do, I can make a suggestion, is someone should collect them. Someone on the board should collect them. Someone on the board should tally them.
I mean, on the council, okay.
To tally them, and then, there's an average rating in reference to do that. A member of the board, and then I do have a right to see them, but someone should gather them and make sure everybody has a response. And even note that if someone chose not to do so, just to say that's why it was averaged out of a total of 4, where the average was 4 rather than the 5.
And that's.
So the employee summary, I mean, so you would take the average and say, I do or I do not agree? Or would you do it individually?
No,
It's a number.
it's the total of the summary.
That's what I'm saying, is you would do that as a total, I mean, whether you agree or not agree. The last page has, employee summary.
Yes.
And what we'll do here is, because, as we discussed when we started this, there will be an executive session, it's just the council on there. That's when the council would get all, everybody's individual appraisal forms, put them together, discuss what's on there, and create the average matrix. And that's what would be discussed with the city manager during the actual performance evaluation that follows.
Yeah, it's never been done since I've been there.
Right.
That's why we're trying to get everything.
That's why I thought it was important to do this, because at some point we need to start.
Having the forms and having the
Yes,
documentation.
There's a
Yes.
process that needs to be in place, and we haven't done that. Except we like to write this, and that doesn't make sense to do it by itself. Well, the form isn't very long, but
You want to go one through one?
I don't think so. I mean, I think they're self-explanatory.
Yeah, and the big thing is there's the big sections on there. Yeah, the header captions, dimension and direction of work activity, how well is she actually performing the job and setting the goals and objectives on there. 2 is the one that was focused on, like human resources management, and how are you managing the employees. The communication and presentation, that's generally how well working with the council. And then 4, the customer service on there, that's really the important part, the community projection, how is the responding to the concerns of the community, and as a municipality, that's the most important. And you can kind of tell these weren't drafted for a municipality, they're a general HR form, it looks like, from some time.
They were made for a banker. Because they're very similar to the ones we used to have at so.
My concern is also, here we're doing a workshop based on critiquing the current city manager's job, when it sounds like this should have been in place a long time ago. So I'll state right now, and I know some of you have previously been on city council prior to our current mayor. It sounds like city council wasn't doing their job before in catching these issues, that it just went on and on and on. So I would urge you to take that into consideration, that perhaps you need to look closely at your performance also.
Well,
I
we
think
would
you-
do it, but they were written, they were in summary form, and we would attach the form to it, but attach the sheet to it. I mean, that's how I've done it in the past.
But the longer time that you're here, the more experience you get, so, you can't learn everything as you go, so, on one day, so. And then when you really learn, it's on the way to get out, so.
Then you're gone.
So, it's just the experience of, you can say, well, you should be experienced when you come in. Nobody's experienced as being a councilman or a mayor, et cetera.
But
Are you speaking for yourself?
So I'm thinking for myself.
either timely or late, what you're doing, I think, is very appropriate, and you need to actually follow up in detail. There's nothing, Chris, that prohibits them from establishing more requirements or standards or whatever to embellish or to supplement what's already in the contract, right?
Correct, the city council is the city manager's supervisor and boss. So whatever
So
the.
doing it now would be appropriate.
Yeah.
And then using it from now on. What happened before, that shouldn't be a factor at all. Let's do it right.
Exactly.
Except parts of it have been incorporated in her current contract. There hasn't been a codicil to her contract to negate the 4 or 5 directives that you guys have already brought up and keep saying they're non-applicable. it's in the contract. So you gotta fix the contract that this woman
Right.
is working under.
Sure.
And you gotta, you already said there's no standards, so where's your task? Where's your goals? Where's everything
Well,
else
that's
that
why
the
we don't
city
want
council?
to back, we Chris.
That's it. I mean, if you don't have a yardstick, how do you measure?
And that's where I think the goal, like everybody else, is trying to get a more objective, these are the goals that we want you to accomplish, how well have you accomplished those goals?
And
At
if I
every
recall,
level.
if I recall correctly, I think it was Mr. Miller who did part of, the majority of that contract, so.
But yeah, and these forms can be done, I think everybody's in agreement, city council and the city manager, that there's probably some changes that need to be made and to the evaluation forms themselves. And if that's the case, that can be put on a future agenda to actually bring up at
Yeah.
whatever time that it can be taken up. For now, these are the appraisal forms that were part of the contract, and so these are the ones that are used. But you can do the summary sheets and everything else as part of that.
Can someone get with the other council members regarding these packets? Because
As long as there's no quorum and the packets can be delivered to them on there. Now,
January will be here at 7, you just can be here at the workshop.
For the workshop.
Just do the liaison on it.
okay.
You don't have to leave it, so.
We're all gonna make this first.
You may not-
Tell Johnny to turn around and there won't be a quorum.
But I think the principle of this whole thing, wanting to do this, was so that we were on the right track and we did the things the right way.
You
Over here.
And I think in our fairness, that we're trying to correct all the wrong
Absolutely.
that ever existed.
Just
And there's
because-
nothing wrong in admitting that things were done wrong or right. If you didn't know, you didn't know. So together we're learning.
And that shouldn't keep you from doing it right in the
we're
beginning.
starting, right, exactly.
Better to start late than never.
Exactly. Sorry, it was me, Ms. Turner.
I think that this is a great start going forward, and if we're all on the same page, so that I can learn. I think the same, like, what Mark said, it takes a learning curve. To be a board member, to be a council member, it takes a learning curve to be a new city manager in a new town, in a new state. And so, some of the fundamentals are there. My mental style is a little bit different than Andy's. We have some existing problems that we have to take care of. This evaluation tool is just an example of one. We have a lot of things we have to fix. And so I can better address your concerns and your issues if you let me know what they are. And that's what the purpose of this evaluation will be. Let me know what I need to do to make the improvements, and then we can see how I can do improvements going forward. Whether it's staff, whether it's communications, whatever it is, to give me an opportunity to do
We need to
that.
be able to tell her what direction we want to see the city going to in the future.
It's really going to be important for me to listen to what you need as I prepare your budget for next year, so that we can see what's important. I mean, we have some issues with outstanding things, with water flow and some things downtown in different areas, mosquito abatements and those kind of things. So, conditions that a lot of you put in, vacant lots, if those are your interests and concerns, then we can move forward, and that's how we'll design the budget that I present. Then I can present a budget that's going to address some of them, not all of them, because we do have some constraints in reference to our funding, but hopefully we can take care of those as well.
Do we have any more questions of myself or the city manager or anything? Who's actually coming to do the next one? I'll be here. I'll be here.